Let's piece these broken pieces together. Alrighty, we're on to episode 12, Phumblepodcast. I have an amazing guest on for us today. This is the first time we've actually seen each other virtually, albeit, but in a long time. Goes back. He's one of my fellow colleagues from UC Davis. We had a lot of fun back in the day in our gospel choir through music. We had a lot of connections through that, and um, he went on to higher education and at
USD.
USD, sorry,
Yeah.
and he's here to talk about that very topic, higher education and teaching. Fellow teacher like myself, and I brought him on today to discuss higher education and the system and how all of that can be a challenge as well as overcoming those challenges. Um, and I think one other thing we share is we're both first generations to get through higher education, becoming college graduates. So I wanted to tap into all of those with him. My guest today is Chris Garcia. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, Pej. It's good to be here. Honestly, it's been a few years. I can't believe it. Technically, it's been 11 years since did you graduate in 2010 or
2011, yeah, 2011.
2011? So dang, 10 years for you, 11 years for me. And but yeah, I'm doing well. It's just glad that we're at the end of this whole pandemic that we're like dealing with, but I can see light at the end of the tunnel. But other than that, these past 10 years have been crazy, and I'm excited to dive into it. But yeah,
Yeah,
man.
good crazy, I hope.
Yeah,
I
no,
know that, yeah, there's been challenges, of course, but there's I know I've been following your social media, and I know you have a podcast now as
yeah,
well, Innovative Pedagogy, which I want to talk about as well. Um, Also, before I forget, I want to mention Chris is a sixth grade STEM teacher and ed tech professor at the University of San Diego. So that's what you're doing currently, along with that podcast, which is great to hear.
yeah,
So tell me how you got into your passion for teaching from college
yeah.
into
So
what was that? What was that process for you?
so it's interesting because I actually had to put it into words at one of our last gospel choir concerts that we had there at Freeborn Hall at Davis.
Yeah.
If you remember, you know how they would put our profiles up there, and we would put like we would had like it was like a chalkboard, and they would put like those more portable chalkboards, and they would put like our names and like what we're studying and what we want to be. So just kind of like to give the audience like some connection with the choir members to see like what we're studying. And because I mean it was just one of those things where it's like you just got a bunch of people just to come sing about old spiritual songs from like the African American history, and
Yeah.
but I remember at that time I articulated it well, and some of my friends really just brought up the point. And it was towards the end of my years there at Davis that I was like, you know what, I want to go into education. I majored in sociology. I had a focus in law and society, and I was debating between law school or education. I
Mm.
knew at one point I was like, I want to help young teens somehow. I want to help them in the judicial system, or I want to help them before they even hit the judicial system, and I thought I'm going to do that in education. Sixth grade was one of the most challenging years of my life, and seventh grade, middle school, was just hard because it's those formidable years where you're not a kid, but you're not even a
Mm.
teenager, and you're trying to find your fit. So I was like, you know what? I want to go back. I want to go back. And at that time, I had just thought, you know what? I'm going to go and apply to grad school, see what happens from there. And And yeah, so yeah, I actually went back into teaching because and I tell this to my students every single day when I get a chance to work with them, which I'll tell you what I do later. But I went back because I wanted to be that sixth grade teacher that I wish I had. And
Mm,
I wanted to be that middle school teacher that I wish
I
I
see.
had. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. And it's just funny because I had to finally articulate that and put it into words in a little bio there for our gospel choir concert. So,
Well, look at that. I mean, full circle. That's great. You were inspired, and I want to get into where you grew up, where you were born, where you were raised, what challenges you faced growing up that led you to choosing this career ultimately. So yeah, where were you raised and or born?
yeah, no, but actually here locally, here in San Diego. So I was actually born in Coronado. For the most part, actually, I was raised in Chula Vista. Thankfully, my parents, they raised me really well. I mean, I come from a pastor's home, which is kind of,
No way, I didn't
yeah,
know that. Huh.
yeah. So, yeah, my dad being a minister and mom actually being a pastor's daughter already. So
Wow.
a lot of that, and maybe you can make that connection why I had a lot of that, like, gospel chord music,
Yes,
playing,
yes. The keyboard. You were the keyboard warrior over there, man, but in a good way.
yeah,
you,
yeah, for real.
yeah, yeah. It
So
was awesome. So
but yeah, I was raised in a good home, and but the challenges was, um I always wanted acceptance, like in elementary school, and especially when fifth and sixth grade started happening. And at the time I really was just dealing with a lot of like anger and bitterness, and I would get really violent. Honestly, I'd get really, really violent in seventh grade. Lo and behold, and I love sharing this story actually with my students at the end of the year. I don't like to get on the details before that, but
mm,
I actually got expelled in seventh grade from middle school.
mm.
I got suspended 5 times, and by that last meeting, that altercation, I technically created a school riot in
Oh
middle.
my God. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and it was all instigating. It was. I actually ended up fighting one of a good friend of mine at the time, and just rumors and kids just wanting. And I'm like, you know what? I want that acceptance. I'm gonna cave in the social pressure.
Uh-huh.
I want to be the cool kid. I want to be the one that finishes on top. And
Yep.
this is a 13-year-old kid thinking this way, and I'm like, and at the time I'm like, man, like I just gave in, and I honestly really hurt the kid. Like I look back and I'm like, man, I could have done some severe damage to him, and it really convicts me even now just thinking about it. And it's almost as if at that time in 2009 and 10 and prior to that, just knowing that I wanted to work with young teens and juveniles and whatnot. And I say that because I was a big term there in sociology when I was there at Davis. And
Yeah.
I was like, I want to specifically target that. And
Uh,
because of that, it just gave me that passion. Like, all right, how can I help? And later on, my parents actually, after I got expelled, my parents are like, you know what? We're not gonna have you like deal with this anymore. I'm not gonna put you, because we're doing everything we can. My parents, they did it, like they did everything they can. And now being an adult and being married, I can totally see that. And so they
mm,
put me in a private school. They put up a private school, and it was a smaller school. The teachers there were very invested in the students.
mm.
And I honestly, I had a big 180-degree turnaround where I went from being like a really mischievous kid to all of a sudden like getting good grades and behaving well and kind of representing the school in a lot of competitions just with like academics and my character development and everything. So at the end of the day, like that's how I was raised, and I always kind of had, I would say, a chip on my shoulder,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like how can I go back? Like how can I make amends to the kids that I hurt? But then how
Uh,
can I make a difference? How can I avoid seeing this happen in my city? How
mm.
can I avoid seeing this happen with the students that kids that are in the same vicinity, same zip code as I am? So how can I do to impact that and avoid from this happening again?
Yeah. It's interesting, man. I'm thinking about my own journey in sixth and seventh grade, and
Yeah.
you know, I wasn't born in America, right? So I was born in Iran, and then moved to America like with a month left to go in third grade. So I don't even count third grade as really a grade that I experienced American schooling in. But
Yeah.
fourth grade was really my first year in, and like you, I was wild. I was, I wasn't really. Um, I was first of all learning the language, so that was an added um, bear, I guess, bump on the road. Like I was trying to figure out, I was trying to go from zero friends to just learning the language of English. And I was raised in Maryland, right? So we moved from Iran to Pakistan to Maryland. Um, and so growing trying to get accustomed not just to the language of English, but to the culture, right? To the
Yeah.
totally different culture. So I can definitely relate when it comes to getting into fisticuffs and fights and and just trying to find myself, I guess, right? Fifth,
Yeah.
sixth, seventh grade. I think my last fight was in seventh grade, like yourself. So, um, but that's what Mike. What I want to ask you though is, so once you went to this private school, did you go into the private school kind of like whatever, or you had made up your mind already that you're gonna make changes, or did it happen just?
You know what? That's funny. I went in with the attitude like, you know what? This like there's a bunch of squares here. Like, I don't like this goody two shoes, like these
Yeah,
kids here. And I'm
yeah.
like, nah. So I purposely got bad grades my first quarter there. I'm like, I'm gonna get bad grades because I know my parents are paying for this.
Oh
And
yeah.
if they see me getting bad grades, they're gonna like, nah, Chris, we're taking you out.
Hmm.
But
So were you
it's
in the hopes of going back to public school? Is that
yeah,
what? Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And on top of that, I felt like I made a name for myself back in public school because I
Yeah.
mean, the reality was that I was already known for getting in fights, and I was already known for like the last day. Like I got a lot of it was interesting. I got a lot of like phone calls. We weren't texting, so I got friends that would call me after because I got to spend the last day, and I would call them during summer break and keep in touch. And like, yeah, Chris, like everyone was talking about the fight the last day of school and everything. So I knew like I want to go back. Like I finally I got to the peak where like I'm a tough guy, and like I'm known, I'm respected per se,
Yeah.
and I could have been in eighth grade at the time, middle school, seventh and eighth, so I would have been one of the quote unquote older kids on campus. And
Right.
but my parents and especially my dad was like, you know what, I see what you're doing. When he got my report card that first quarter in eighth grade, he's like, I see what you're doing here. So you think we're gonna take you out, but I'm gonna tell you, we're not taking you out. You're
Huh.
gonna work hard, and when the grades come back in December, they're all gonna be A's. He said, I'm already telling you what your grades are going to be. They're going to be A's. And I'm like, oh, dang it. At that point, I was like, all right, fine. Like, I just gave in. Like, I was like, my parents aren't going to fudge. I'm
Yeah.
going to give in. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I don't know. But then yet there was some like really cool things. Like some of my teachers there, like they really just took an investment, like of really helping me, talking to me, and really just kind of like getting down to like the deeper issues. Like, and that was a nice thing about being in a smaller class. I was in eighth grade with like 5 other students.
Wow.
So that was my eighth
Yeah.
grade
Yeah. Yeah.
class.
That's
Oh, and
small.
yeah. And so but yeah, like it's just funny you say that because I did try to get out. And but my parents, I mean, they were like, no, like this is not money wasted. Like you're gonna stay here and you're gonna change. And I just
They read your bluff.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I get it, man. I my parents didn't take me out of, into out of public school, but they basically said, you're you're gonna make something. What changed it for me was the fact that, they left Iran because higher education wasn't even an option for people of my religious background. So that's,
Wow.
so like not being Muslim, right? So I wasn't raised Muslim. I wasn't part of Muslim faith, but in Iran, that is the umbrella religion that
Right.
governs the whole country. And the Baha'i religion, which is what I was raised in.
Mhm.
Anyway, they're persecuted and they're not accepted over there. So good luck trying to get a higher education as
Wow.
a follower of that faith.
Yeah.
Long story short, we end up here. My parents and my dad and mom's goal was, let's give myself and my sister a chance to have a higher education. So that was really one of their main motives to come here. So I started to get to that age, ninth, 10th grade. throughout high school, I didn't really get it, but it got to the point where it was like, I was like 17 now, and I'm like kind of not really caring as I should be
Yeah, yeah,
about education after high school.
yeah.
And so that's when from Maryland I came to California. My parents said, "All right." My sister was already married at this point, so they shipped me west. They were like, "You're gonna move over there with her
Yeah.
temporarily. We're not supporting you anymore financially." Like it was like reality check, right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but it was the best thing that happened to me in hindsight because it really um woke me up, and I had to fend for myself essentially because they specifically directed my sister and my brother-in-law not to help me, and I'm glad they didn't. So it was good. I They just gave me a place to sleep. That was it. Everything else was on me. And then I eventually figured my stuff out, and
Yeah. Did you do the
that
junior college route too, or?
yeah, I went through
Okay.
community college, and that's actually where I discovered I always loved music, but then that's where it's always funny. I was in a friend's car in Fresno, and we were listening to Bohemian Rhapsody, and through that entire 6.5 minutes is by the end of that 6.5 minutes, I knew I was gonna be a music major. So it was like, and I can tell you honestly, that's where it happened.
Yeah.
I always loved music. I love performing. My parents are musicians, but it was like not taken seriously. And there was also other pressure I was putting on myself, like, oh, that's not a real career, this and that.
Yeah.
And then I realized if I want it that badly, I can make a career out of it. Right.
Great. Yeah.
So that's where it happened for me. And then fast forward a year or so later, I was at Davis, and that's where we met. But
That's so cool.
I know, yeah. So back to you. So now you've um given in, as you said,
Yeah.
and you decide to, all right, I want to actually try and get the grades that I know I can get.
Yeah.
So you finish middle school the private route. What about high school? Do you go back to public?
I stayed at the same school.
Oh, same school. Oh, it
It,
offered all the way through
it
senior
all K
year.
through 12. Yeah. Yeah. So I
Wow.
stayed there, and yeah, I stayed there, and it's interesting because as you're saying, the music thing, I was involved actually in middle school all the way through my freshman year in high school. I love baseball, and I was playing baseball,
Yeah.
and like, I mean, everything about it. I mean, if you follow me on Instagram, like, I'm always posting something about the Padres and stuff.
I do. I do.
Yeah. But I got involved actually with a local gospel choir, and and even some of my classmates were African American, and our chapel services there, they would get down, and I'm like, man, this keyboard player, this Hammond organ player, and the drummer, I'm like, and it was funny because even it was, the music was even better than my church, my local church.
Okay.
And I was like, man, like, I don't even want to go. Like, I was like, I'm already cool with chapel here. And seriously, they got down. The music was awesome.
Yeah.
And it really inspired me. I was like, I want to learn. I want to learn how to play keys. So I actually started learning at 17 years old,
That's
16,
so,
17.
yeah, that's great, man.
So that actually led me to that. And I will kid you not, like, I mean, to this day, like, I'm still learning. And like, that's when I was like, I want to do the music thing, and I wanted to do that. And so, so yeah, I actually ended up doing that. And I'm just going to throw a little tidbit there, but I actually ended up graduating from a public school later on, in Texas. And the reason why is because my dad, being a pastor, felt the call to move to Texas, where he's originally from, and open up a church.
Okay.
So that was a big culture shock, because I ended up going from being here in San Diego, and being already like 4 years at a small private school, going to Texas, and my senior year in high school.
Oh man,
I know.
that's got to be hard. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was very hard. But here's the thing: I was like, I had seen the excitement of my father, and also the calling that he had, and he felt really convicted. He's like, in his mind, he's like, God's telling me to do this, and if I
Yeah.
don't do this, then I'm gonna have to answer to him. So we're gonna do this. And then, like,
Okay.
in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna support my pops, my little sister and brother. They went with me. Well, all of us, my mom, and I thought, like, you know what, like, this is more important. This is important here, And I always thought this is an opportunity, honestly, to be the light at a public school again. Like
Yeah.
I'm going back to a public school, completely different. It's in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like so yeah, I ended up graduating from a public high school my senior year. There's a few friends I still keep in touch with that I met there. It was different. I was confident in who I was. I didn't have to try to be the cool kid. And technically, because the region of Texas we went to, because we were from California, I guess I was technically already kind of like, oh, leave him alone. He's too cool for us. I'm like, okay, cool.
Oh my God, that's funny. I didn't know. I didn't know that's how they look at us. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, seriously, yeah, if you leave California sometimes, like if you go to the South or other
yeah,
places, like, oh, you're from California,
I
like
see.
with even if you're conservative or liberal, like
Yeah.
all of them, we're all liberal, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, cool, cool. Okay,
So I'm
I
like,
got
okay, cool, like just like whatever floats your
you.
boat, like. And at that time, I was just like, so I really embraced just kind of an introverted senior year, and it was just it was different,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was cool. It was cool at the time, and
But you
whatnot.
had found yourself, you would say, right? By
Yeah.
that point. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I wasn't intimidated by anyone, kids coming in trying to like cause
Yeah.
fights or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I
You
even
were
even
focused on the studies, I'm assuming, at this
yeah,
point.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
at the time, I was taking AP courses and
Okay.
other stuff too. So I was like, hey,
Yeah.
I gotta focus. I got things I gotta work on and do. So
Well, yeah, good man. Good for you to I mean that maturity that happened, I guess,
yeah,
as a result of private school and then going, and when you went back to public school, you were like ready.
yeah, yeah.
How was your faith at that time? Like how strong of a faith did you have during those formative years
You
trying
know what?
to
It was pretty strong. Like I would have to say it was really strong because there was experiences that I was having where I would be praying and I could honestly feel like I could seriously feel like God just like answering prayers.
mm-hmm.
Especially during the time we were in Texas. Like my parents were living off like whatever offerings came in at our church. So in my mind, I'm glad you're asking that because I'm gonna share a story now and then later on there was actually a challenge that I got into when I was at UC Davis when I was in one of my sociology classes internally.
Mm-hmm.
But there was times where we didn't have food, and there would be someone just knocking on the door from a family member to a church member to someone that we had just met, and it was just crazy. Like, hey, I don't know why I'm doing this, but here's $100, and people would just come and drop off, and like immediately after that, we would go to the grocery store. Other times, people say, "Hey, are you all home?" I'm like, "Yeah, like we're gonna drop something off," and it would be people like straight up groceries, like, and I don't,
uh,
and I don't remember my parents calling these people like, "Hey, like we don't have anything." They weren't over here like, and we had food, but it wasn't like. It was just like sometimes it would be quesadillas,
yeah,
Mexican,
yeah,
just
yeah,
tortilla and cheese, and that's what we're eating, and
yeah.
and it was like that. And at that time, I'm like, man, like I remember my mom, like she's just praying. She would always just say that, let's just pray. And um, even one time we were driving back from California because my mom's from over here, and we would come sometimes road trip to visit my grandparents.
Mm.
My grandfather wasn't doing so well with his health at the time, so we would have to make road trips. Our tire blew out in New Mexico, and it was one of those stretches in New Mexico where it's like there isn't a rest stop for another 30 miles, and it was straight up flat. So
Oh,
I was like, what are we gonna do? My dad's like, let's just do what we know how to do. Let's just pray and let's just keep driving. And during that whole time, we kept driving, and my dad like on the side, and like nothing happened. And then we finally were able to, and we actually made it into a tire shop at a gas station, like an all-in-one with 15 minutes to spare. And the guy was able to like fix it. And at that time, I was
wow.
like, how did this happen? Like, how did like we not swerve? How did this not impact the other tires? Like all the physics and like everything
Yeah, yeah.
coming. And I was like, and it was just those experiences that came about. And I was like, so I would have to say my faith was pretty strong, only because I mean, it was just what I was raised with. But at the same time, I was like, I was really experiencing in my mind, like, God, you really are providing for us. Like, I'm really praying and really just kind of like saying, okay, how are you gonna? It's gonna be kind of funny, but like I was like, okay, God, like let's see if you can prove yourself. Like, let's just really see if you can prove yourself right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of those experiences, and yeah, so
Almost like a confirmation, like
ex-
those moments. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
and even then, it's like that's how we knew, and that's how I knew, like we're doing the right thing right now. We're doing the right thing with my parents, doing what they have to do and whatnot. So yeah, to answer the question, man, that's so my faith, like it grew a lot
Yeah.
because of just seeing these kind of things happen.
Totally, man. Totally. Well, I'm glad you made it to that tire shop, man. That's a crazy story. I've had flats too in the middle of nowhere. It's not fun.
No, no.
Uh, um, so you finished high school in Texas,
Yeah.
and then what? How did you? So when you started applying, I'm assuming you started applying to UCs, or did you go community college route
No,
too?
so okay, so there's just a little segue there. I actually didn't go to school immediately.
Okay.
I started working at my first job actually out of high school was in Office Depot, and it was cool. I was a technology computer sales guy, and which I loved it because I was like, you know what, it's my first job. I get to
Yeah.
talk technology. I get to see the latest gadgets that come in and whatnot. But the thing that convicted me there was I saw a lot of like fathers working, like fathers and family
Mhm.
men,
Mhm.
and these guys are talking about their kids. um they're struggling sometimes with they're not full time, so they're struggling getting at least 32 hours a week. And I'm
Mhm.
like, man, this, and for me this is just a job, like I'm still living at home,
Yeah.
like, and I'm just working,
Yeah.
and in my mind I always knew like I want to go back to school. And what, during that time, my parents, being in Texas for 3 years from 2002 to 2005, the summer of 2004, my dad said, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to let you on the roll. I'm going to be here for one more year. We're going to move back to San Diego in 2005. So I'm like, okay, sweet. So we moved back to San Diego. And in 2005, that summer, I actually go to my community college down the street that my a lot of my friends and relatives, and then technically the community college I would have went to if I would have stayed in Chula Vista. I
Uh-huh.
went to Southwestern College and I wanted to apply, and they said like, all right, like, where did you graduate high school? I'm like, in Texas. I'm like, oh, well, technically you're non-resident. So the $20 a unit is now like $175. I'm like, are you serious? Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't qualify for scholarship. Like, no, you don't. And I didn't qualify for like EOPS or any
Oh.
government, like Board of Governor waivers fee or nothing, because I wasn't a resident. So I'm like, so I spent the following year just working again.
Yeah.
So I didn't go to school full time until 2006. And I started 2006. And when I was there at Southwestern College, I was just taking my classes and whatnot. And I had the hopes and thoughts. I'm like, I'm just gonna go to San Diego State. Like everyone goes to San Diego State, I'm gonna go there. And my counselor was looking at my transcripts and the classes I had taken. He's like, "Have you ever considered a UC school?" And I'm like, "No." It's like, "I think you should." I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'll consider a UC school." And all of a sudden I'm looking and I find out about Davis, and I'm like, Davis, like I know about UCSD, I know about UC Berkeley,
Yeah.
UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, UC Riverside. Oh, like, Davis, like, what is this? Like, so I looked Davis up and I'm like, man, it looks pretty cool. And really what caught my attention was the bikes and the double decker buses.
Okay.
It wasn't anything else. It wasn't like, like, oh, it's number one veterinarian school or anything. I was like, and then on top of that, I was like, all right, it'd be kind of cool to like live on my own for a little bit, because I had never lived by myself, and I'm here
Mhm.
like 23 years old already, and I had never lived alone. I'm like, and on top of that, like kind of far away, because from San Diego to Davis, it's
Yeah.
like 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
So I'm like, it's like, but if I really needed to go back home and catch a flight, it's only an hour flight, no big deal.
Right.
Like,
Right.
so so yeah, I actually transferred, and um I was I had my, even my associate's degree was a transfer of studies, because I'm like, I want to get out of here. When I got to Davis, that's when I declared sociology, and I had the prerequisites for it. But yeah, I the junior college route, I would have to say, was it was challenging. I didn't get a chance to utilize it, but it was also one of the biggest blessings, because I did not have to pay a single cent.
Yeah.
Being a first year college student, being part of EOPS, I got all my books paid for, all the classes paid for, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, I seriously did not have to pay a single cent for my first 2 years of college, and
Wow.
yeah, I mean, that was kind of one of the blessings of being a first year college student.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
I don't
look
know.
at that? Did you look at that as another source of confirmation too? Like,
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's like how in the world am I able to do this? And I will be honest, like I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, like um in school. Like I honestly, my GPA in high school, like it wasn't the highest. So
Hmm.
I actually had to take a lot of remedial like math courses
I see.
in even in junior college. But one thing I realized was, hey, you know what? I'm consistent with turning in all my work. I'm at all the classes. I'm involved with the discussions, um, and I'm doing all the exams. And at the time, I mean, when you're in a semester long school, like it was great. Like it just worked out. And thankfully, I was able to do the transfer admissions guaranteed. The only challenge I had in junior college was a psychology statistics class because I had to learn how to read stats and create the algorithms for like having like the bell curves and the outliers and whatnot. And
Hmm.
but I'm never gonna forget. I actually went and I did tutoring every single day. I would get my
Wow.
homework done. I did tutoring and it was free. And I was like, this is and I'm a big advocate. I even told my wife like if our kids are going to go, like if they don't get full rides to schools or whatever the case is, junior college is always, for me, that'll
Yeah.
always be a great option because at the end of the day, like I still graduated Davis,
Yeah,
so
yeah, man. No, that's great. You look at it, you were driven, you looked at that as an opportunity, and you didn't let that opportunity slip by. And that's again similarities, right, between yourself and I
yeah,
also went through the community college route, as I mentioned earlier, and within 2.5 years is where actually I figured out what I wanted to do. I majored in all these other fields where my heart wasn't really in it.
yeah,
I just thought it was going to be like, it's a better money maker, whatever, right? So,
yeah,
but so yeah, so that's kind of, we our journeys to Davis is kind of similar,
nice,
and right around the same age too. And so that's where you declared as a sociology major, as you said, and then
yeah.
you finish up Davis. Do you move back to San Diego, I'm assuming, after that?
I actually stayed a year. I stayed a year to work for an internship for a college ministry that I got involved in,
Okay.
Chi Alpha. And I actually stayed a year because I had become really close with, and Mark Afshar.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, and on top of that, I had only been away for 2 years. And I was like, man, I like this. I kind of like this independent life, and like, I
Yeah.
don't want to go home right away. San Diego's awesome, but there's still a few things about Northern California that I still want to experience. I have
Mhm.
a little bit more time now. And we actually became roommates during our intern year because we both did an internship there that in 2011
Okay.
or 2010, 11, that school year when
Right.
basically when you graduated.
Yeah.
And still got a little involved with the gospel choir, not too much, only because the internship took a lot of extra time and whatnot. But yeah, I actually I was like, you know what? Let me just enjoy that extra year. So, but during that year, I did apply. I applied to the University of San Diego and then to Point Loma, and
Okay.
also Sacramento. I also applied to Sacramento State. I was actually going down my registrations the other day just to look at former emails, and so I applied to those three schools for each one of them for the master's in education.
Hmm.
And but I will say that I didn't get accepted to either one other than USD, and the reason why was because my UC Davis GPA was actually kind of low. It was because I struggled at Davis.
Mm.
Um, that was one of the biggest challenges I had was just the going from a semester system at a junior college or community college to a quarter system, and then having a lot of um, lecture based courses, even with teachers. They would just get up there, give their spiel for an hour, and I'm like trying to like take it in. I'm like, all the test material was based off the lecture, and I'm like,
Oh.
Oh my gosh, it was a challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
And now being a teacher, being a professor now at USD, like I'm like, there are a variety of ways that people learn.
Right.
And sometimes that probably wasn't the best way I learned. So yeah, yeah, I will say also one of the things that happened in Davis that actually drove me a little bit more towards the end of it, because I would say my first year being on my own, being by myself, that's when I pretty much my grades tanked. And the truth is that I was on academic probation for about a couple quarters my first year.
Okay.
But what really got to me was two situations that actually happened, and it kind of falls into kind of the systemic stuff that's been going on. Was one, I had a TA in one of my classes, and he told me like, "Hey, Chris, I hope you." And we were in. I was visiting during his office hours. He said, "I hope you don't consider graduate school because you're not that kind of student." And I was like,
Wow.
"Okay." And for me, I was like, "That's like," and I at the time, I'm like, "Fine, that's what you're thinking," but in my mind, I'm like, I know what my calling is. I know my confidence level. I know the purpose that I've been like was created for and born for, and I'm like, okay, that you're gonna be, sir, a bump on the road. I didn't tell him that, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not over here accepting like, oh no, yeah, I suck as a student. I'm like, no, I was like, no, I'm not gonna let that happen. And then it happened again with my counselor, my guidance counselor at UC Davis. When she saw my grade, she's like, maybe we should change your major. And I'm like, okay. And then when I asked her, I said, what major do you think we should change it to? And her response was, why don't we change it to Chicano studies? And I'm like, Chicano studies? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I said, it's funny you say that because, and at that point, I was ticked when she said that. I was like,
Yeah.
that's so funny you're saying Chicano studies. Like, I understand that history is actually the easiest major on this campus. And if you think that I should change my major to something like easier, more feasible for me, how come you didn't suggest history? And then she totally backed out. She's like, oh no, you can change it to whatever you want. I said, so even biosci, like, would you be okay if I change it to
Hmm.
biochemistry?
Hmm.
She's like, yeah, you can change it to that. And I'm like, okay, all right, now we're talking. So maybe I should change it to a major. And I said, but you know what? I'm gonna keep it at sociology. I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'm going to prove anyone else that's been wrong. And prior to that, I forgot to even mention this part. Prior to her mentioning for me to change my major to Chicano studies, she gave me the beautiful statistic that only 4 out of 5 Hispanics actually graduate from UC Davis.
Oh man.
And
Oh
in my,
man.
I know, and in my mind, I'm like, why are you sharing me those odds? Like, what's the purpose? Like, you're my guidance counselor. Like, I don't
Yeah.
feel very encouraged right now.
You don't feel guided.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I will say that it kind of it gave it a nice fire, pretty much.
Well, yeah, it gave you that extra, like that chip that you talk about. Put that a bigger chip even probably at that
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah. And I will tell you that thankfully I was able to like finish successfully with like good grades there at Davis. That actually brought my GPA to a passing degree.
Yeah.
And it kind of overrode what happened during my academic probation. And the beauty about USD was that they were looking at a cumulative GPA from my junior college and UC Davis.
Okay.
Sac State wasn't, and neither was Point Loma. Not to dog on what they have their systems, and maybe they
Right.
changed it.
Yeah.
But I just felt like, you know what? There's a reason why I'm going to go to USD, and I know it's going to cost a lot of money because it's a private school, and it's
Mm.
a and but I thought like at that time, like my faith kicked in. I'm like, okay, like God, like if you want me to go there, you're gonna find a way for me to pay for this, and find a way for me to pay it off. So
Yeah.
so, but yeah, I don't really share that story of what happened at Davis, because I mean that was, um, I'm not gonna lie, like those were some of the racial tensions that I actually had to deal with when I was
Yeah.
there.
That's tough, man. I appreciate you being willing to share that here. Now I'm curious, once you did bounce back and you boosted up your GPA at Davis and you graduate, did you ever run into this guidance counselor again, or how
No,
was no?
No, and I sometimes I'm like, you know what? I wish I could email her.
Hmm.
I did email the TA though,
Okay.
especially right when I got into grad school because it was like a year after. I said,
I see.
hey, I just want to let you know, you told me this on this date when I was at your office hours, and but I want to let you know that I actually got into grad school, and so what you actually shared with me actually gave me a fire. I thank you for not believing in me because it allowed me to believe in myself, and I'm in grad school, and
Wow.
yeah, he
What a
replied like apologizing, but then also kind of congratulating, but then yet like so.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, listen, you handled that as professionally as one could, and the way you thanked him and you were humble about it. That was you were reminding him at the same time that you didn't forget, but you also thanked him for giving you that extra fire to get through everything. So
Yeah,
good for you, man. That's great. So at USD, what was the uh, higher education, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
then how many years was that program?
That was a 2-year program. So I started 2011. I graduated in or 2011. I graduated in 2013, and that one I got my teaching credential for K through 8,
Oh, okay.
multiple subject,
Yeah.
and then I got my master's in curriculum and instruction. So
Okay.
yeah, basically, yeah. So it was my master's in curriculum and instruction. Um, so master's of education, and the nice thing about that trip or that those years was that, again, don't forget, like I'm a big techie going back to Office Depot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The iPad had come out what 2009, so it was barely like 2 years old, and my action research, aka thesis, was utilizing mobile technology to support English language learners,
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
that actually rose to the occasion where I was able to have my focus in that. And it's funny because I actually have a photo back here, right here, this one.
Yeah.
This is actually from Kenya, and in 2012 I actually went on a like study abroad for like 3 weeks to Kenya,
No way. That's cool.
and it was part of the coursework that they did there. And the professor there took us for 3 weeks, and she gave us all different assignments to work on, different projects.
Hmm.
And she asked one of us, she says, which one of you want to take on the technology project? And that is, she said, showing the teachers that we're taking 10 iPads and we're taking 30 iPod touches, and you need to show the students how to use the iPod touches in the class, and you need to show the teachers how to teach, um, or how to use different tools on the iPad to support their pedagogy, their instruction. And I was like, I'll do it. Like no one wanted to do it, and I was like, this project was meant for me. And I was like,
Yeah.
so and I was given the challenge of like, so I downloaded all these apps, I programmed 10 iPads, 30 iPod touches. I got to connect with my professor connected me with some of the ed tech gurus for the county office of ed here in San Diego. And it was just like the networking that happened, the experience, and the opportunity to even just go to like literally the savannas of Kenya, and 4 hours north of Nairobi, here in a little small town called Nanyuki, at a private, um, it was a private school, and it was a K, it was a no, it was a 9th through 12th grade private school because Kenya is under the British system, and I believe one of the things that happens is you only get free public education from K through 8, and
Oh, okay.
so, but if you want to go to high school education, secondary, you need to you have to pay for it.
Oh,
So
man.
all these students that we were working with are actually on scholarship. So and it was a relationship that USD had with this school, and yeah, like my biggest like takeaway from that was being able to like support the teachers, show them how to use like Google Apps for education, show the students how to create, at the time, even how to do like voice memos and then upload those for like podcasts in their region or for public service announcements. And then so but one of the biggest challenges, which I like to talk about, was I only had 3 hours of electricity to work with a day.
No way.
Yeah,
Wow.
because at the time they didn't have electricity; it was all on power generators, and there was no Wi-Fi. So some of the apps, I mean, you unless they had like a direct connection, but there wasn't Wi-Fi. So one of the cool concepts that I taught the teachers was and it was very popular at the time, and we used it a lot now because of distance learning. It's called the flipped classroom. So I showed some of the teachers there how to record their lessons on the iPad.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the leadership of the students there was just exceptional. Like they wanted to be there to learn because they knew they were on scholarship. They knew that getting a high school diploma would lead them to higher education themselves, and that would support not only them but their local tribes from all over Kenya. Because in Kenya, there's like I believe, don't quote me on this, there's around maybe like 48 different tribes, and at that school, they specifically had 43 of those tribes represented.
Wow.
So a lot of and it's an all girls school too. So that was another thing. It was an all girls school, and
Mm.
so it was just giving them a lot of that social opportunity to like rise to the top, to rise and break that glass ceiling that had been established not only in Kenya but in the continent of Africa.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it was interesting to see like the teachers were just astonished, like their lives were just freed because some of them had to work different classes. They had to either teach two classes at once, or they had to they were also coaches, so they would have sports tournaments.
Oh,
So if they had a sports tournament, they couldn't stay and teach their chemistry or biology class.
right.
So by me showing them how to pre-record their lectures on an iPad, that was revolutionary for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they would
Wow.
leave that for the students, and the students would use that and get the lecture and the readings and pretty much kind of like teach themselves the concepts. So it was those little things. And this is 2012. You're like, if you think about it, that's almost 10 years. And I mean, at the time, that was pretty cutting edge,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, no, that's heroic almost, man. You opened up that whole new portal for them of possibilities, and that's yeah, you're right. That was your calling because like you were there at the right time for that. Like they needed a tech guy, and
yeah,
you were the tech guy. I
yeah,
mean, you had the experience.
yeah.
So that's awesome, man. Kenya, that's on my bucket list to go to Africa and
You would
visit.
enjoy it. One of
Yeah.
the biggest highlights is you want to go to you need to do a safari ride, and it's a long day because you get up around 5 and you get there at 6, and then you're not done until like 8 p.m.
Okay.
And you only usually get lunch, but you can eat snacks and stuff. But
Mhm.
it is one of the most breathtaking experiences ever. Like it makes the Lion King like come to life, and like
No way. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. My cousin was born in Kenya, if I'm not mistaken. Because he's Persian,
Okay,
half Persian, half Indian, but they were pioneering at the time over there, and my both of my cousins were born there, and then they moved to America. But
that's
yeah, yeah, but that's my only connection to Kenya. Other than that, I definitely want to visit my wife as well. So so you do this amazing study abroad, and then you come back, and what point are you from finishing USD and then going on to actual teaching
yeah, yeah.
in the
So
school
I'm
system?
I have a year left. And then in 2013, when I'm graduating, I get an opportunity to apply to a brand new school here in Chula Vista at the actual district where I was born and raised. It's kind of like that full circle, like
Wow.
where I was in sixth grade. And um, the funny part is that at the end of the interview, I go into this interview and they ask me like, "Hey, out of all of our 500 candidates we have at our school, um, what sets you apart from all of them? Is there like some?"
500. Wow.
And I was like, and actually, what I did was I shared with them what I just shared with you about Kenya.
Really? Wow. Okay.
And at the end, the principals are like, I actually, we have not heard that story from anyone here. Um, wow. And I within 4 hours later on, I get a phone call saying like, "Hey, congratulations, we'd like to hire you. However, how do you feel about teaching sixth grade?" And I was like, I like that. I think I'm going to do that. I think I can handle it. So I end up going and I teach sixth grade there, and it was an affluent area of Chula Vista, a brand new school. It was called Enrique S. Camarena, named after the DEA agent from 1988. Which is there's a story behind that, really powerful. I mean, you can look it up online, but it's a really powerful story. Enrique S. Camarena, and I end up being there, and But the thing is, I always knew in my heart that I wanted to be eventually go to school administration.
Okay.
And the reason why was because I always looked at it. That's for me. That's a way of me being in a pastor's home. I always thought, like, I saw my dad serving the community, serving the members, and being there. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to do that, but I want to do that in a way where I actually can get paid.
I see.
And I felt like a principal is kind of like a pastor, if you really think about it. Like,
Oh
they're
yeah.
serving the community, they're serving families. They have to put on events.
Mm.
They have to support a staff.
Mm-hmm.
They have to look at the well-being, social, emotional, and academic well-being, not only of the kids, but even the teachers and the custodians and the cafeteria staff and everyone else.
Yeah.
And I had gone in with that desire. And one of my colleagues is had been teaching already at the time for like 20 years. She told me, like, hey, you know what, Chris, I'm going to tell you though, that's awesome that you have that aspiration, but if you don't get any experience teaching at some of the Title I schools, some of those low income schools, and you go into administration right after this, and they put you at a low income school, the reality is this: the teachers are not going to respect you because your expectations are going to be from all the affluent, well-off
Okay.
schools, and
Yeah.
they're not. And from there, I was like, all right. So I was at that site for 2.5 years, and then I ended up transferring to a Title I school for another 2.5, and I went from having 5 English language learners at my first site in the east part of Chula Vista to having 29 English language learners in
Wow.
the west side.
Wow.
And I kid you not, though, that those two experiences right there were the best experiences ever. Um, I got to see differences within families. I went from getting $150 to $200 worth of Starbucks cards during Teacher Appreciation Week to getting to like 20 and homemade like gifts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not that I was like, oh, I want my 100, but it was
Right.
just, you saw the heart. And at the end, I was like, man. And I would say this, that as much as like the 120 extra bucks of Starbucks gift cards, as much as I appreciate that, to see the sacrifice that a lot of these kids did, and families, just to like appreciate me during Teacher Appreciation Week, that
Yeah.
meant the world.
Yeah.
And here's the part that really got to me: when parent teacher conferences came around, to have moms and dads crying
Oh yeah.
because of the growth of their kids, saying like, ever since you became their teacher, like, they've had a complete change, like at home, like their attitude, they don't talk back anymore, they're respectful. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I didn't know I was doing that. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know I was having that much of an impact. And I
Yeah.
just, that was a part where I was like, man, like. And but then later on, because of all the tech stuff that I like to do, I got an opportunity to actually become a engineering resource teacher. And during that time, I actually had just finished San Diego State. I actually got my admin credential. So
Hmm.
now, if I ever want to actually apply to be a principal, I could.
Okay.
So, but I'm still gonna give myself. This is my 8th year teaching. I want to do it for another 7 years, so that way I have 15, and then do 15 years in administration.
I see. I see.
So it's kind of like I have like a a plan.
That's You're organized, man. That I commend you for that. That's great. Like you actually have all of this, but that in itself, that organization is comes from your vision from origin back when you had, coming out of high school, going into community college and figuring out. You told us in the beginning that you didn't have the best sixth and seventh grade experience, and you wanted to change. You wanted to be the change as far as a teacher student relationship,
Yeah,
and you did that. And the proof is in what you just mentioned with the parents, like showing that appreciation to you. um that connection that you have, along with the organization that you have for this it's all coming to fruition because you have your mind set on this, and and that what that brings to mind, though, is not everybody can be that clearly focused on a path, right? Even
yeah,
at our age now, right?
yeah,
It's not that easy. Some things come to us as opportunities. Some careers become clear, like music for me, teaching in school systems for you, teaching music for me. Like all of that was, I feel like, is we're lucky. Honestly, I think we're
Yeah,
lucky that we were able to recognize that as oh, this is what I should be doing as an adult.
absolutely.
How what would you suggest to someone, even your own students perhaps, that are not sure, at even at their young age or even when they're older? um what if they came back to you and say, hey, Mr. Garcia, I still don't know what I want to do, and I'm lost, and I don't, I can't find my passion, I can't find my path.
Yeah.
What would you suggest to someone like that? Because there
You
are a
know,
lot of people that like that
yeah, yeah.
around.
Well, that actually, it's interesting you say that because that's exactly what I teach now. Um,
Oh
I
wow.
I teach all in all. When I talk to adults, I tell them I teach strength finders to kids. I teach them to sixth graders. So my position now is I teach over 4,000 sixth graders. I see a different class every day, and I teach them how to identify their strengths and uh, and their passions. And
Okay.
one of my favorite phrases I always tell the students is like, you've always heard, and I've always heard in my life, like, what's wrong with you? Well, today we're going to talk about what's right with you.
Okay.
Everything that's right. If you're introverted, that means there's great things happening. If you're extroverted, that if you're shy, if you're creative, if you're aggressive, if you like to talk a lot, if you like to be the center of attention, if you're shy, if like, and all
Yeah.
these different attributes. And I'm like, every single one of those things, there's nothing wrong with you. There's actually a strength behind that.
Yeah.
And I get to talk to them about that. And that's what I would tell them. And I would still tell them that. And I still talk to my students about that. Even ironically, I have a lot of students that even follow me on Instagram after they leave sixth grade. I give them permission, like, all right, now it's not weird. You can follow me, like I have nothing to hide on my social media account. Like,
Yeah.
and I always thought, like, let me be that teacher that always like that you can always keep in touch with, that you can always go to for whatever life advice or college advice or whatever the case is.
Gotcha.
But the point is that yeah, I would definitely tell that to students, like what are you passionate about? What are the things? And the reality is this, is that there's a career, there is an opportunity for you to do that. It's going to take hard work. It's
Yeah.
taken hard work for me to get to where it has. I know it's taken hard work for you,
Mhm.
ever
Mhm.
since you came over here in third grade, learning the language and dealing with those things. That's when your work began, and the
Right.
transition, even probably the plane ride, get from Iran to Maryland, like, dealing with that,
Yeah.
like that's when a lot of those impactful moments come. And I would definitely tell that to my students now, like, and for anyone, even an adult. I've actually talked to some adults about this. Like, what are you passionate about? What are the things that you like to do? Do you like to problem solve? Do you like to, are you curious? Are you imaginative? Are you organized? Are you a motivator? Like, what are the things that you like to do? And that's at the end of the day, like there's some way, somehow, there's a job that has that criteria of those characteristics of individuals.
That's great, man. That's great that you're inspiring the youth of the San Diego area, but also they're gonna go on, hopefully, to become incredibly successful in whatever they do in high school, college, and beyond.
Absolutely.
Um, that's great, man. So, what as far as you talked about your marriage. So, at what point through all this journey
Yeah.
did you find your wife?
Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
So my wife and I, we met actually at our church, our local church, and
Okay.
she's actually a musician too. So
Hey, there we go.
yeah, yeah. And we actually met because she was actually one of the keyboardists, and then I was a keyboardist. And in the beginning, it was really funny because it was uh yeah, I needed like coverage, and like we was kind of like, we had a big team enough for people had to cover each other. And
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I can't make it to the service, can you play? Like, sure, I could play, cool. And she would ask me for the same favor.
Right.
And then it was ironically another one of our keyboardists was like, she just had texted me, he's like, you need to ask her out. And I'm like, really? Like, and I kid you not. So my wife, her name is Laurel, and we met in 2016. We got our first date was on September 24th. and yeah, September 24th of 2016. And then we were dating that whole year, and we got engaged September 20th of 2017.
Almost a year to the day.
Yeah, yeah. And then we got married on September 14th, 2018. So
Look at that, man.
yeah.
And you're getting points right now for remembering all these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it helps. You know what helps is that they were all like, technically, if you would think about it, they're all a week apart.
Yeah, yeah. It's true. It's true.
Yeah. So
You were even organized about that. That's cool. No, no, it's good, man. Well, congrats on that. That's great.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm and being in this sharing the passion for music is even that's a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it does help. Cool, man. So your podcast. So you started
Yeah.
this podcast recently, as far as I know, at least. But you can tell us how long ago you actually dove into podcasting and wanting to
Yeah.
podcast. How did that
Yeah.
all come about?
So it was about 2019 that I started, and I got a blue microphone that I'm using right now, and my wife actually got it for me for our first Christmas being married, and because I had kind of just threw the idea and the vision, like, man, it'd be cool to kind of start a podcast and whatnot, and
Yeah.
and what was going on was that I was having these really amazing conversations with school administrators, local ed tech leaders, even colleagues, and and prior to that, I had even produced a podcast for one of my former administrators. I wasn't doing like any of the vocals or anything, but I was kind of like the mixing, the mastering, and all that other stuff, and the fun stuff that we get to do once the session's over, recording and whatnot.
Yeah, the editing process.
Yeah, yeah. But I was like, you know what? I want to go out. I want to talk about things. I want to talk about stuff that's innovative. And it also goes kind of with my job, because I work technically, my job is, the site is called the Innovation Station.
Oh, okay.
But I also want to talk about good teaching, because teaching is very fluid. It's very relational, and in grad school and education, when you talk about good teaching, like pretty much, like if you break it down to like the Greek, like terminology is like pedagogy.
Yeah.
Like the study of like just like looking at something that's just a good practice, and at the same time, like I want to interview teachers that I see doing great things, teachers that have good relationships with their students, teachers that are on the cutting edge, always on the innovative side, and even administrators and department leaders and whatnot. And I want to give them a platform to showcase themselves, because I'll have a chance to learn and even share my experiences. But so yeah, that's what I did. And so yeah, like, and we've talked about several things, and I'm like, I want to cover bases from not only good teaching, but even stuff that is challenging, from special ed to English language learners to racism. I mean, because that's stuff that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
And inclusivity, and just so yeah, and I want to be a learner too. So I'm like, this is a great opportunity for me to learn about somebody else, give them a platform to have their voice heard, and also stay current with the stuff that's happening. I remember literally on March 13th last year, one of my colleagues and I did a special distance learning like emergency episode to like help teachers, like, hey, you're going to distance learning, now what? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
So we actually broke down a plan for the teachers. And the funny part is this, is that it's actually the plan that we teach our graduate students at USD and some of the technology courses. So it was
Oh, wow.
it was perfect timing. And this past year, I was able to interview another teacher that talked about the hiring process during distance learning or during COVID, and then teaching, going from being in the classroom to being in person, to being in person with a bunch of plexiglass and masks and social distancing, and how does that work? How do you function with that? And then also, I actually got interviewed with one of my former professors from junior college that was a communication one, and he's now the vice provost for equity and inclusion and diversity at the University of Kansas. And it was perfect, because I've been in some tough discussions where like I'm with a group of other teachers, and we want to address a lot of these like racial tensions that are happening, and we want to address them, but we don't know how to.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Let me go to an expert. And he actually he gave amazing advice and created a plan there on the podcast. Like, let's go ahead and like these are the things that you have to do. Um and it's been really, really cool. And to hear people's stories, to hear their journeys. Um and yeah, I thought like, you know what, I want to create a podcast where it's innovative and we still talk about education in a way that is relevant and hopefully impacting and inspiring the lives of people.
That's beautiful, man. Again, shared. I for me, I love that you focus everything that you're doing, the podcast, what your job, your relationships with your students, everything is about uh, opening up people's potentials and opening up that deeper inclusivity, as you mentioned, like that we all have something. There's all I believe in that we all have a reason that we find each other. Like
Yeah,
I feel like
absolutely.
you like it's not a coincidence. I don't believe that. Like I decided to start a podcast, and then one of my friends from college is already doing one, and then you reach out to me saying, "Hey, that's cool that you're starting a podcast," and I'm like, "Wait a minute," and then I look into yours, and I see that there's a lot of similarities in the motive behind wanting to do the podcast, right?
Yeah,
Like you're you're focusing on the school administrators and teachers, and for me it's kind of more opened up to like just togetherness. That was my motive, just bringing
yeah,
people together. But the learning is huge, like learning from like yourself or learning from another person that had a completely different experience from me growing up, right?
yeah,
Like there's so much to be learned, and I think that's the point. uh, um, and and it's great that you're doing what you're doing through your podcast, Innovative Pedagogy, and you're able to create these systems for better learning for future generations, because ultimately I believe that we're all here to make a better future.
yeah,
And if that's the goal, that and you're doing that through your field, and that's your passion clearly. And um it's just wonderful to see that, you know, there's more people that are focused on that, and it's becoming more and more with more tension we see on the news and on
yeah,
the in the
yeah,
world, especially in America with the unfortunate events. It's sad, and it's heartbreaking to see so much racial tension. um Never really went away, unfortunately, but it's just it seems like it's getting worse and worse. But I also believe that that creates more of a reason to bring things like this,
right,
to bring
right,
people together, because we can't we can't believe everything we see on TV. We can't believe everything we
right,
see on social media even, right? um I think if we can uh social media, you know, in relation to human history is so new, right?
yeah,
It's so like it's such a it hasn't even reached the surface of its potential, let alone its actual potential, right?
yeah,
So like, and you know, human error, we are always going to have the mistakes throughout while we're trying to get better and try to improve on a tool that we've discovered, like technology and social media. But I think the biggest thing for me is using this platform and your platform, through your podcast and your teaching in school, which is more personal level, um, is to teach that there's real purity that can be used with technology, with social media, with
yeah,
even the news. And I've said this before. I am hopeful, and I can can visualize and see that the future of politics, the future of society, the future of America, the world, it is going to be ultimately controlled through technology and the people,
Mm,
because they're behind all technology are individuals,
yeah.
and I think we're starting to learn how to use that, for the betterment of society, for the betterment of the world. And I think, um, just the mere fact that police brutality is getting blasted all over the internet right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that, they were able to get away with that for years, and
Yeah.
no one had an inkling, right? You would hear through it through months later through a newspaper maybe, or through, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the mere fact, and I know you already know all this, but I'm just
No, it's
saying this
good.
to the listeners so that, um, I can more clearly uh, describe my motive for this podcast, is this exact thing, is, um, when I decided to start the Fumble podcast because I wanted to uh, help it in any way I could, by one, bringing togetherness, and I've invited all shapes, sizes, and colors, like it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
It's
That's
not the,
awesome.
yeah, and um with every guest that I thought I knew already, I've learned like a book worth of new stuff that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Today being a case in point, like I learned so much about you that, we don't get those opportunities one on one that often, right? So it's
Right.
like, that's what I love about it, is, it creates, like, it makes my heart happy, I guess, to be sounding lame about it, but
No, it's
it
good. I like that. Yeah.
it's not to get long winded, which I did, but it's just, yeah, it reminds me, right, having these conversation, it brings me back to my purpose, like, oh, this is really why I've been doing this, right?
Right. Right.
and
Right.
and there's episodes, I'm sure you've had episodes where you were like not like 100% for, right? You probably feel like, oh, I got to do this interview today, but then you do it, and then you start to remember, oh, right, like you start to
Yeah.
you, like, just from learning, listening to someone, and then this whole racial, like how to teach racial divides and how we did get around that. Like you
Yeah.
had a whole episode that you learned about that, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear that episode, by the way. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there and it's interesting because even as you host a podcast and do this, it can be uncomfortable sometimes too because it's
yeah,
like it can be convicting, but then yet it's like, okay, this is the reason why you're doing it. Because if you're
exactly.
convicted as a host, just imagine anyone that's actually just listening because they see the title of it. It's like
Yeah,
you already know that's a good thing. Like they want to change. They want to learn. They want
right.
to hear the other side. And especially, and I love this platform because you literally have to listen. And in this day and age, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah,
People want to be like they want to get their opinions out there, and yet they don't want to listen to someone else.
yeah,
But
yeah,
this kind of platform, you have to listen,
yeah,
and
yeah, because usually, I mean, I've been listening to podcasts for years, right?
yeah,
I always had a passion, small passion for it. I actually made it come to reality recently, but I always am. I realize how much I'm learning just from listening to them. So it was like, okay, well, let me combine that with my own passions, right? Which is the arts, the creative arts. Um, and then I was like, why just keep it at that? Why don't I make it even bigger? Just talk to people of all experiences, right? Um, I've had religious people on here. I've had ex-convicts on here. I've had um, teachers on here like yourself. Like it's and that's my. I think there, with every episode I do, I'm seeing, oh, there's so much more I can do. Like it reminds me, right, that this is great, and I want to continue this. Um, so anything you want to plug before we wrap up our amazing conversation?
no, I mean, at the end, I'm just thankful, and I will say this is that as much of a challenge as it was, and I will for higher education with the academics and whatnot,
Yeah.
I would say to anyone that's interested in going to go to college, you're not only just getting a degree, it's not just a paper. It's not throwing money away either. Cause I hear a lot of people saying, like, you know what, you're throwing money away. Like,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
there's ways of getting this paid for. Just like anything else. There's ways of paying off a house and ways of paying off a car. Like, this is
Mhm.
worth it. But one of the beautiful things that I actually, and my wife and I continually talk about that because she went to UCSD, and is the friendships and the network that you make when
Yeah.
you go to higher ed. When my time at Davis and my time at USD, the friendships that I have, I mean, we have friends that are civil engineers, literally,
Yeah.
because my roommate, one of your best friends,
Yeah.
and we have friends that are doctors, pharmacists, counselors, politicians. They work, I mean, all over and software engineers. And it's like, these are people that are influential, like in society. But when it gets down to it, we have stories to share. We have commonalities. We have things that we look back and like, man, that was such a good time. Like
Yeah.
every time I'm on SoundCloud and I'm like, man, I miss hearing Roz and Pej like singing a duo. It's like,
Oh, that's cool, man.
it's like, man, those were the good times. And then when I talk to my wife about these stories, I'm like, I didn't just get a degree. Like, I got a network, I got friends, I got people out there that like, and even yesterday, like, I got a phone call from a friend of mine, like him and his wife are moving to France to become missionaries, and I'm like,
Wow.
this is cool, like, and I told my wife, like, hey, you want to go visit some friends in France now? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
let's do it, it's like, and this is the kind of stuff, I have friends that are teaching English as a second language in South Korea and Japan, and and it's like, and it's just beautiful to know that your friends that are out there. So I would just say my last plug, because this was a higher education focus, would be like, not only are you going to like get quote unquote a piece of paper, but you're going to create friendships. And if you
Yeah.
go to college, get involved with groups, get involved with clubs, because everyone there is for the same focus. Everyone's there to accomplish the same thing, but you also can't do it alone. And you definitely need relationships and you need friends, especially on a college campus, because it could be a scary time from anyone that's between 18 and 25 years old living on your own. It can be scary because there's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, there can be a lot of victories that come out of it too.
100%, man. I couldn't agree more. And you said it. You're not alone in college, and you and that's what this thing is here, togetherness. And Chris and I are a result of being in college and finding each other and through a shared class, but it became way more than that, and
Yeah.
other friends, mutual friends that we have. So, hey, that's great that you're reminding people of that, and people who are stuck right now and not knowing what you want to do. um College doesn't hurt, and there are ways to get it paid for. Don't let that be the reason, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So, hey, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Do check out Chris's podcast, Innovative Pedagogy. You can find it on Instagram, and it's all on all podcast platforms. I just subscribe to you. I listen to it on Spotify, but I subscribe to it on Apple Podcast too, just
Nice. Thank
to
you.
help you out a little bit. You're not that you need it, but
No, I
but
appreciate it. No, anything helps right now. So
for sure, man. Hey, thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to maybe one day meeting Laurel, maybe post COVID, once things are back to normal.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yes. You would love
and
to meet, and I need to meet your
seeing.
wife too, man.
I
So
know Shayla. Yeah, definitely. I'll let her know. And I'm still in Sacramento area, but we love visiting the San Diego area. So when we do, I will definitely keep in touch.
please do. Would love that. Would love that.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All righty. As always, subscribe, like, and follow Fumble Podcast on YouTube and your podcast platform of choice. Thank you again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.
together we'll purify the mind and have a good time. I'll showcase your very best.